Colombia rejoices after Gustavo Petro and Francia Márquez's victory as the new president and vice president of the region. On Sunday, Spain's opposition People's Party won an absolute majority in Andalusia's regional elections. In Russia, Senator Konstantin Konsachev denounced that Lithuania imposed an economic blockade on the Russian region of Kaliningrad. From the headquarters of TeleSUR English in Havana, Cuba, this is From the South. I'm your anchor, Gladys Quesada, and these are the news. In Colombia, the National Civil Registrar Alexander Vega Rocha announced Gustavo Petro as the new president of the Latin American nation. With 99.95% of the votes counted, the Civil Registrar announced Petro's official victory in the current presidential elections. Gustavo Petro and his running mate Francia Márquez Mina will be the presidential duo that will run the country for the next 4 years. On the other hand, his opponents Rodolfo Hernández and Marlene Castillo of the League of Anti-Corruption Governors got 47.30% of the votes. On the other hand, the president-elect Gustavo Petro reaffirmed that they were making history after winning the presidential elections in Colombia.
We're making history. We're writing history right now. A new sort of history for Colombia, for Latin America, and for the world. This is a new history because undoubtedly here what has happened today with these 11 million voters that have actually brought us to this stand and to the government of Colombia. This is a change.
During his speech, Petro also stated that he and his running mate Francia Márquez were part of the resistance of Colombia.
Thanks to these efforts and thanks to these enormous force that comes from behind, from previous generations that are no longer with us, we are hardly part of an accumulation of resistance that has been around for almost 5 centuries. We are part of the resistance of Colombia.
During her victory speech, the Colombian Vice President-elect Francia Márquez Mina thanked the people for their historical victory in these presidential elections.
And I'd like to thank my Colombian people for this historical moment. I also like to thank all those Colombian people that gave their lives for this moment. All of our brothers and sisters, social leaders that have sadly been assassinated in this country.
Regarding Gustavo Petro's victory, some presidents and other personalities gave their opinions on the matter. Also, the president of the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela, Nicolás Maduro Moros, congratulated Gustavo Petro and Francia Márquez on their historic victory in the presidential elections in Colombia. Maduro reiterated that the will of the Colombian people was heard as they came out to defend the path of democracy and the peace. He also said that new times are coming from the fellow country. On the other hand, the first secretary of the Cuban Communist Party and the president of the island country, Miguel Díaz-Canel Bermúdez, expressed his heartfelt congratulations to Gustavo Petro on his election as the president of Colombia in a historic popular victory. Díaz-Canel reiterated the country's willingness to further develop bilateral relations for the well-being of the peoples. Also, Mexico's President Andrés Manuel López Obrador congratulated both candidates on their win, which he described as historic. The Mexican head of state also noted that Colombia's right-wing sectors have always been tenacious and tough. Meanwhile, the president of Argentina, Alberto Fernández, expressed his happiness with the victory of Gustavo Petro and Francia Márquez, which concluded in the electoral process in Colombia. The Argentinian leader conveyed his congratulations to the president-elect for the trust that the Colombian people have placed in him. Iván Duque called Gustavo Petro to congratulate him as the president-elect of Colombia. Duque also said that they agreed to meet in the coming days to initiate a harmonious, institutional and transparent transition. And also, Xiomara Castro de Zelaya, on behalf of the people of Honduras, congratulated the brave people of Colombia for electing the historic social change that President-elect Gustavo Petro represents today. We have more on the matter. Former Brazilian head of state, Luis Inácio Lula da Silva, congratulated the running mates of the historic pact coalition, Gustavo Petro and Francia Márquez, and the entire Colombian people for their important victory in Sunday's elections. The member of the Workers' Party wished Petro and Márquez success in their government and highlighted the victory's strength and democracy and progressive forces in Latin America. And finally, following the confirmation of Gustavo Petro and Francia Márquez's victory in the recently concluded presidential elections in Colombia, several heads of state and public figures in the region congratulated the candidates. One of them was the 1980 Nobel Peace Prize winner Rodolfo Pérez Esquivel, who emphasized that the victory of the historic pact coalition represented a step forward for the Latin American unity, a project under the banners of equal rights, sovereignty and future. We'll take a short break now. Join us again after this. Welcome back to From the South. On Sunday, Spain's opposition People's Party won an absolute majority in Andalusia's regional elections, boosting the new conservative leader's odds for the national elections in late 2023. The Conservative Popular Party, the PP, won 58 seats in the 109-seat Andalusian regional parliament, which will allow it to govern alone in Spain's most populous region. The Socialists captured 30 seats, its worst ever result in the region, which is home to some 8.5 million people. The Socialist Party had governed Andalusia without interruption since 1982, when the region government was established. This is the Pedro Sánchez's third consecutive regional election loss to the PP after votes in Madrid in May 2021 and Castilla y León in February. Rainbow flags and slogans fly in the streets of Nicosia, Cyprus, where Greek and Turkish Cypriots gather for the first time to celebrate Pride. Hundreds of people from both sides of the island marched to the Home for Cooperation in the buffer zone of the divided capital as part of the United by Pride community-led LGBTQI+ parade. After crossing the Ledro Palace checkpoint coming from Kugulu Park, marchers from the north carried a rainbow flag that was seen together with the same flag that marchers from the south had carried from the Eleftheria Square. The march from both sides from the island was peaceful with light police presence, as the participants were at times chanting in support of LGBTQI+ rights. This was the first intercommunal pride parade to take place with physical presence in the island. Now we address other topics. Guatemalan authorities declared on Sunday a red alert in 90 municipalities following rains and also floods that have killed at least 21 people. According to the latest report from the National Coordinator for Disaster Reduction, in the current rainy season that began in April, more than 600,000 people have been affected and 21 died. The report also cited that in the past 24 hours, 12 incidents associated with rains have been reported nationwide, with the largest accumulated precipitation recorded in Jutiapa in the Guatemala department and at Puerto San Jose in the department of Escuintla. There were also reports of strong winds, floods, and landslides. And at least 59 people died during the last few days, and the millions are affected by heavy monsoon rains hitting northeast India and Bangladesh this week. The worst hit regions are the northeastern Indian states of Meghalaya and the Assam, where more than 2.6 million people are affected after 5 straight days of rain. Police officials said lightning killed at least 15 people in 8 Bangladeshi districts since Friday, and 4 people were killed in landslides. The situation worsened on Saturday with widespread flooding and massive power outages in what is believed to be the worst flooding in Bangladesh in more than 100 years. According to the weather forecasts, the flooding is expected to worsen over the next 2 days due to heavy rains. Chinese authorities activate emergency measures to help the population in the midst of the floods affecting several regions of the country. Local authorities in Guizhou in the southwest China and Fujian and Zhejiang in eastern China activated emergency flood relief measures, including evacuation of affected residents to safe areas and the restoration of vital facilities. State media reported on Saturday that floods in southern Guangxi province in recent weeks caused 5 fatalities. A series of heavy rainfall has affected more than 2.34 million people and caused damage in 110 countries in that province.
In the early morning of today, as the water level continued to rise, we promptly transferred the affected residents to safe places. In order to prevent people from straying into danger areas, we have set up a cordon on the embankment. The flood is the biggest one this year, and it has caused the collapse of 4 houses and damaged water conservancy, power supply, communication roads, and other infrastructures. We have evacuated a total of 1,140 people from 273 households.
And 10,000 demonstrators joined the climate march through the Netherlands city of Rotterdam on Sunday. The demonstrators are against the recent farmers' protests over the nitrogen plan announced recently by the government, which will significantly reduce nitrogen emissions in the Gelderzee Valley, North Brabant, and the Limburg by more than half. While the farmers believe that the government is going too far with unrealistic plans to protect nature, the environmentalists said that the government lacks urgency to combat climate change. The march will finish at the starting point with a number of speakers and music. The government of Azerbaijan announced on Sunday that it agreed to establish a joint committee with Iran to develop a series of oil fields in the Caspian Sea. The Azerbaijani Oil Ministry said that the agreement ensures the development, production and export of energy resource complexes in order to meet the interests of both countries. The Azerbaijani Economy Minister Mikhail Jabarov and Tehran's Oil Minister Javad Oji signed a memorandum of understanding in Baku on June 3rd, calling for the strengthening of bilateral cooperation in the gas sector. And we have more news coming up after a final short break, so stay with us. Welcome back. In Russia, Senator Konstantin Kushachev denounced that Lithuania is violating the rules of the World Trade Organization by imposing an economic blockade on the Russian region of Kaliningrad. The Russian senator rejected the announcement by the Lithuanian authorities to restrict rail transit of Russian goods through their territory in order to comply with the sanctions imposed by the European Union. In this regard, Kushachev recalled that Russia and the European bloc signed in 1994 a cooperation agreement to guarantee the freedom of transit. For his part, the governor of Kaliningrad, Anton Alikhinov, denounced that this action will affect between 40 and 50% of the entire cargo flow and pointed out that this measure is a flagrant violation of international law. Hundreds of people demonstrated in Tunisia on Sunday in a second day of protests against a constitutional referendum called by President Kais Saied that his opponents said will cement his hold on power. The demonstration was organized by the Salvation Front, a coalition including the moderate Islamists in Handa, the largest party in a parliament that Saied dissolved in March. It followed a similar protest on Saturday called by the Free Constitutional Party over the referendum and a strike on Thursday by a powerful labor union over government economic reform plans, which brought much of the country to a standstill. Saied's move heightened accusations at home and abroad as he has consolidated one-man rule after assuming executive power last summer and setting aside the 2014 constitution to rule by decree.
We are here under one title, which is to stand against the coup and for the restoration of all democracy, which was betrayed by Kais Saied. This is the essence of our system. Any addition to that from solutions and deception under the title of a referendum or a constitution or elections is meaningless.
In Palestine, government officials called to stop Israel's expansionist and colonization policy. The Palestinian Foreign Ministry denounced through a statement that the recent wave of attacks against the inhabitants of the West Bank is part of a strategy of Tel Aviv that seeks to raise the tension to create a state of chaos and instability and in order to push forward its expansionist policy. The Foreign Ministry considered that these actions are part of Israel's race against time to permanently close the door to any opportunity to generate a Palestinian state with East Jerusalem as its capital. The Foreign Ministry urged the international community to assume its legal and moral responsibilities to stop the neighboring country's offensive. In Israel, members of the education union and various sectors of society protested this Sunday against salary conditions. More than 2 million students started classes at 10 a.m. local time due to the partial protest of educators. Teachers claim their salaries are too low. According to the Daily Israel Hayom this Sunday, several police officers are protesting for the same reason. The press claims that some 400 police officers have left the institution since the beginning of 2022. Bus drivers from the General Workers' Federation will also stop work tomorrow for 2 hours to denounce their low salaries. Jerusalem, Netanya, and Ashud, among others, will be some of the cities affected by the strike. And tens of thousands of Rohingya refugees in Bangladesh staged demonstrations on Sunday demanding repatriation back to Myanmar, where they fled a brutal military crackdown 5 years ago. The demonstrations come after the foreign secretaries of Bangladesh and Myanmar held a video conference meeting last week, their first in nearly 3 years, during which Dhaka pressed Naypyidaw for the repatriation of Rohingya refugees to start this year. Almost 1 million Rohingya are confined to bamboo and tarpaulin shacks in 34 squalid camps in southeast Bangladesh, with no work, poor sanitation and little access to education. Their increasingly restrictive host country has banned them from holding rallies since they staged a massive 100,000-strong protest in August 2019. But authorities allowed several groups of Rohingya to hold simultaneous go-home marches and rallies ahead of World Refugee Day on Monday. TeleSUR expands its signal with new satellite parameters. Since more than ever, the world connects to us and our stories are being heard in other farther away nations. These parameters are in place since June 1st in Latin America and the Caribbean, both in English and in Spanish, and quite soon further changes will be implemented for the signals in Europe, the Middle East and Africa. This new multi-platform will continue providing truthful content to oppose the hegemonic media's narrative and our faithfulness to our audience. So we have come to the end of this news brief, but remember, you can find this and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. And also, if you feel so inclined, please join us on social media for all the latest news. We are on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram and Telegram. For TeleSUR English, I'm your anchor, Gladys Quesada. Thank you for watching.